Theorizing that science fiction could actually be good in her own lifetime, author Deborah Pratt created Sam Beckett and allowed him to step into the quantum leap accelerator and created one of my all-time favorite shows. She never found herself trapped in the past, so she's been writing her forthcoming sci-fi series, Vision Quest and Warrior One novels. Her only guide on this interview today is me, Scott Ryan, a pop culture author who writes about film and television, but appears at the Book Fest in the form of a superfan of her work. He can't wait to learn how she finds herself leaping from project to project, striving to bring human storytelling to the world, and hoping that during this hour, we can learn how our next leap will be to quality writing like my guest, Deborah Pratt, who hopefully doesn't want to leap home after that convoluted introduction.
Ziggy would be very pleased with you today.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on me knowing that you're the one that voiced that over. So do I owe you any money for that? Did you write that intro that was on every Quantum Leap episode?
I did. And everybody loves it. It's funny. I've gone into meetings with execs who were like kids when the first show came out, and they'll start the meeting to say, "Oh yeah, I'm a real fan of the show, and if you don't mind, I'm going to geek out for a minute because I watched it with my parents and my grandparents and my sister, and we used to get in front of the TV." And then they will just explode with what the show meant to them. And so
what did it mean to you? Like, now that, I know there's a new one and we'll get to that, but what is it like to have that as your legacy?
It's an honor. It truly is. The idea came to me reading A Short History of Time by Stephen Hawking. And I got to the part about quantum physics, and they started talking about quarks and the fact that quarks could coexist in two timelines, but they would switch places. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And then I got to Einstein's theory of relativity that said time and space is limited, and there's only room enough so that if there are three people in a room, a fourth person cannot just appear. And I went, oh, well, that certainly changes all the rules of time travel. And I realized that in order for this character to leap in, they would have to knock somebody out. But then what would that reality become? Because suddenly he has the sensations and the memories of Swiss cheesed, of course, of that other person that they've leapt into. And so I have to share this story. So Don and I went to Brandon Tartikoff, who was head of NBC at the time, and pitched him Quantum Leap. And he went, oh, there's something really fascinating here. I'm not sure what it is. It doesn't fit into anything that I have. Go away and come back. So we get a call like 3 days later. We go back, and he said the cleverest thing I've ever heard, and it's taught me to pitch from a whole other perspective. He said, tell me the story like I'm 6 years old. And then after we told him the story like he was 6 years old, once upon a time, and he said, tell it to me like I'm 86. And what I understood in those two requests was the universality of storytelling. And the fact that if I could do that with any story that I create, I have created a universal conversation with the viewer, the reader, whoever. And then when we got the show going, everybody was pissed, and some interviewer actually said, "You have changed all the rules of time travel." And we went, "What rules of time travel?" And we were into about the third episode, and I said, I want to write him. I want to write Sam leaping into a black man. And the studio said no. Don said year 3. And I called Brandon and I said, you get this better than anybody. what do you think? And he said, I think you're absolutely right. Go for it. And that episode of Sam leaping into a black man, and then I wrote one the first time he leapt into a woman, really launched the show, because suddenly he became every man, every woman, every person on the planet, and people wanted to come back to see who he had leapt into. And so it's a real honor to be able to tell stories from inside a character and allow the viewer to feel and become that character, that person, that life.
Well, that's the episode where Sam sits at the counter, right? That was the first time you leapt into a black man. Isn't that the episode?
Correct.
And that really is the first episode where you kind of see what this show can do. I find it interesting. Did you have more trouble? Because was this like 86, 87-ish, right?
89.
89, okay.
By the time the show, well, by the time that it was still 89. We came on in February of 1989.
People would be more upset with him leaping into a black person than a woman? Which way did you have more trouble with?
Black person, definitely. I wrote an episode where he leapt into a black doctor in the Watts riots, and he had a white girlfriend.
Great episode.
Oh, thank you. And the many states in the South wouldn't air it, even though he was a white man with a white girl on screen. When he looked in the mirror on 2 occasions and saw that there was a black man, they pulled the show. So that said to me a whole bunch.
Definitely. And you think that, you go all the way from Star Trek in the 60s, and you would hope that things would be better. That probably in the early 90s. I think that episode is season 2 or 3, isn't it?
Yeah, season 3.
Not season 1. That seems crazy to me. What about now? The language, because I just rewatched Quantum Leap over the last 2 years, and it held up. But there are certain words that are used in that show that you would never get away with being on network TV. And it's, there's no warning. Everybody was fine. How do you feel about that with the new Quantum Leap?
Very frustrated. Very frustrated, because we're traveling, back in time. And there was a show where he leapt into a black boxer, and the police came to the door and confronted Ben. And I remember saying, well, wait a minute, this is 1972. So the police would probably get in his face in a very aggressive way and may say, I don't know about your show, but he would say the N-word.
Right.
And everybody freaked out. And I went, this is a time travel show, guys. If we don't tell what the time was like, we're just as bad as all the other people that are trying to define race as critical race theory and not history. So one of the things that I think is really important is that we remain true to history. But that's difficult in a hypersensitive time. So that is frustrating to me.
And so I'm assuming you lost that battle.
I did lose that battle.
Yeah, I figured. But I agree with you 100%. When I watch a show that's set in the past and they try to bring the way we live life now to then, I'm out. It just takes you out of it. And it's about being true to where we were and where we are today.
I think that's why the original show was so incredibly successful, because in the period of Sam's lifetime, 1953 to the future, essentially, all those people were alive. So the grandparents knew civil rights. The parents, some of the parents knew civil rights. And they had a unique opportunity to have that water cooler dialogue after the show. We were probably the first show to be discovered in a chat room on the internet in 1990. We found our audience where, today is Twitter and all that. We found the audience in there, and we could really communicate with them. I think when you have that unique opportunity, it's almost interactive television. in a way. So I feel like it's important to tell the truth about that time. And that's why those young executives had such visceral feelings. I'll tell you a quick story. I remember getting a letter from a school teacher, and she had recorded the show on her VHS of the black, the black Southern gentleman leaping into the restaurant, and she played it up into the fact that he sat down, and she stopped it. And she said to these 10-year-olds, "What do you think happened?" And so they said, "Well, he got lunch, and, he got lunch. He was hungry. He said he was hungry. So he got lunch and then went on for the rest of his day." And she said, "Well, let's see what happened." So when she pressed and played the button where everybody turned around and everybody looked at him, and he got thrown out of the restaurant, basically, if Miss Tilly hadn't come in and gotten him. And then she stopped it again. And she said her 10-year-olds were livid. Why would they do that? Why would they treat him like that? And what she realized in 1990 was that these children had no reference. It had not been taught in their schools. There was no, and now you were in the story with him, experiencing what that would feel like to somebody who looked like them. So the power of that suggestion opened up again a dialogue that needs to be had, constantly needs to be had.
Well, I mean, you did such a good job on that show doing that exactly. And I think one of the things about watching Quantum Leap is then when the episodes don't do that, those were the episodes that you struggle watching now all these years later, because there's so many powerful ones. All the episodes that executives fear, that's what we as viewers are actually interested in. How frustrating is that for you as a writer?
I think it's very frustrating. I mean, to be a creative and to have someone say, "Now I'm going to bind your hands, right, and I'm going to bind your mind, and I want you to fit in this safe, politically correct corridor," it's very frustrating. It's why I think in many cases network television is killing itself.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And here I am. I'm a pop culture writer, and everything I write about is from the past because it's hard to be interested in what's new. I'm interested because my first question up here I have for you, you've kind of touched on both. So I'm going to be so fascinated to see what your answer is going to be. But when you are writing sci-fi, are you starting with the science aspect of it or the character aspect of it? Because you've sort of answered both sides of the Quantum Leap thing. So I'm curious, where do you start if you're doing Vision Quest or The Warrior One? Do you start with science or character?
With the Vision Quest, all right, let me put it this way. With the Vision Quest and with Warrior One, because Warrior One is from the Vision Quest world.
Okay.
I'll tell you a story. So conceptually, I had come up with the Vision Quest years and years and years ago. I mean, pre-Star Wars years ago.
Wow.
And I made it out to Hollywood. I started to pitch it to Peter Guber at Columbia. I was like, I did a reality show called The Starlets, me and 6 other girls, and we went and interviewed old movie stars and heads of studios and stuff. And my interview was with Peter Guber at Columbia. And I tell this story because it's kind of funny because of the trajectory that I ended up getting pulled into. So I said to him, "Oh, I have this story. It takes place in Earth's future and it's science fiction." And I started to talk about it, and he held his hand up and he said, stop. Science fiction is dead. I just turned down George Lucas for this Star Wars thing, and everybody in town's turned him down. And I said, "Well, what's Star Wars?" He said, "Oh, some space odyssey." No, it's Star Wars. Science fiction is dead. So I go on a hunt looking for what's Star Wars. This is 74, maybe. And I come across somebody that works at Fox, and they said, oh yeah, we got that script. We're going to do it. And I said, well, can I read the script? So they gave me an original Star Wars script, which I swear is in my Indiana Jones looking storage buried somewhere.
Well, and put that thing on eBay and forget about writing these books.
I can't find it. I've looked. So it was 140 pages, and it was a 10-page treatment, and R2-D2 and C-3PO weren't in it at that point. They were kind of like 10 Ewoks. Anyway, jump to years later, they start auditioning for Star Wars, and I see a little teeny blurb in the Variety and a telephone number up in San Francisco, Mill Valley, whatever. I call the number, which I'm sure was on a rotary dial. And some guy answers, and I say, hi, I'm Deborah Pratt. I'd like to audition for Princess Leia. And he went, are you Irish? And I went, well, actually, I am Irish if you count Black Irish, because I'm of mixed persons, and I happen to be Irish. And he goes, no, you have to be Irish. And I went, okay. Cut to 1976 or 75, maybe it was. I'm now working in Debbie Reynolds' Vegas act as a singer-dancer. While she changes costumes, I come out and sing. Down this, I'm over at her house for a costume fitting, and down comes Carrie Fisher the day she gets Star Wars.
Oh my gosh.
And so I go, Carrie, you got Star Wars, you got Princess Leia. And she goes, science fiction is dead. And I went, no, it's not. Obviously, you're doing a really big movie for it. She goes, yes, but the movie that I really want to do, Mother gave us a camera, and Debbie kind of rolled her eyes, and Carrie went off, and I went, why isn't she happy about this? She goes, well, I had called Sir Alec Guinness, and I told him, tell that George Lucas hire my daughter. And I went, what? And I said, is that how it works? And she goes, absolutely, honey. It's who you know. And the rest is history. She's on. So I figured the Vision Quest was being done by George Lucas. Obviously, it was a really great job. But then I realized how different it was from what story I wanted to tell. Cut 2 years later, literally. I've done Quantum Leap. I've done everything else. And I said, I think I'm still not seeing what I visualized. So I start to rework the Vision Quest, and 9/11 hits. And I remember 2 days after 9/11, my 13-year-old daughter, my 7-year-old son, we come out on our porch to do a candlelight visual. And I'm lighting their candles, and my daughter, Troyan Belisario, says to me, I will never know in my lifetime the freedom you have known in yours.
How old was she?
13.
Wow.
And she nailed it in such a way that it gave me chills. And I said, how can I take this child and give her hope? How can I give hope to every person in this generation that realizes what they're losing? And that's when I started writing the Vision Quest. And I wanted to tell a story about Earth in the not too distant future, where after the great quakes of 2029, which is kind of prophetic coming from then, we are having a lot of earthquakes, we're fracking, we're doing all this other stuff, and Atlantis rises. South America sinks, but it's domed, it's an underwater city. We survive, we unify, we create an almost utopian society. We put our genetics into animals and create alternate species, and their humanity is so new to them, they remember the powers that we have forgotten. Telepathy, the ability to manipulate matter. We also put our genetics into machines, and they become sentient. Sound familiar? Close? And then the story becomes, will we as humans unify and remember our powers before the machines build their army and eradicate us? And so I did world building. I wrote an 80-page Bible before I wrote page 1, and created this future world that I wanted my children and everybody else's children, grown-ups, whatever, to participate in. It's an interactive story in that sense, and that's one of the things that I want to build. And Warrior One is a story thread from the Vision Quest books. Jetta A is not in the books. Her brother is in the books, and her journey is to find her brother who was taken by the Black Guard. And his journey in the books is, it's like a small storyline, but we really get to know the world. So I'm using these books to build this universe.
I don't know how to tell you this, but sci-fi's dead.
I know, it's terrible. But it goes back to the characters. I think the story had to be placed in the future. So the future brought science fiction. And then I had to stop and really go do the science. I had the characters in my mind of Laser and Kyla, 3 friends. I originally wanted a female lead for the Vision Quest, and everybody back in the 90s said, no, it has to be a guy lead. When's the guy going to come and save her? I got shut down so bad. So I wrote Laser as my lead hero. But Kyla's very important in it, which is why Jetta A is so important to me in Warrior One. But once I had defined the world and really researched science fiction. So when I was doing the Chimera genetic splicing, that stuff that was happening is happening. The things that we're doing with clones, the things that we're doing now, back then were being just talked about. And I looked at those things and I did research on them and then said, what if, which is the greatest gift a writer can have.
I think it's interesting that you wrote an 80-page Bible. For people that are listening today that want to write something where they're creating a world and they're doing science fiction, why would you suggest that having this Bible is a good place to start over just starting with chapter 1?
Well, because you can start with chapter 1, but suddenly you'll get to a point where, oh, where do they live? What does the city look like? How do they get around? What do they use for money? What is medicine like? Where's religion? You know, all those questions you're going to find out as you write your story. So you're going to have to stop and pull back unless you've made early decisions. And that's not to say that when you get into the thick of it, those decisions might not work and you have to go back and alter them. But you've got this foundational document to build on and pull from and have answers to, so that when your mind is flowing, you go, oh yeah, right, that they have healers in the future that can do metaphysical healing on people. You know, what are the elements that you want to put in and utilize in your storytelling that is going to advance this civilization? What does a vehicle look like? What is it propelled by? We know that oil has to go. So there cannot be oil used for fossil fuels. I mean, to keep polluting. We had to get rid of that. So the idea of creating a utopian future, I answered my questions of how would I build this world to make it safe, breathable, stop global warming, all that kind of stuff. That was important to me before I started writing. Now, that's not to say when I got into book 2, different things happened and I had to go, oh, right, I didn't think about that. Where did the virus come from that, you know, killed domestic animals? Why did we put our genetics into animals and create an alternate species? I needed a backstory. Where did money come from? How do you create a global financial situation, which we're trying to do now? So I projected what a future could look like if we were a unified planet, if there wasn't great disparity between the wealthy and the poor. And the planet said, oh, well, there's enough food, there's enough water. You have everything you need. Now build a great society.
Would you say that the Bible that you wrote is more of like a map, or is it more of an outline where you know where book one is going to end, or it's not really plot based?
No, the Bible is not plot based. It really is just answers to. I didn't do a beat sheet. Maybe I did a beat sheet on the first book, or I knew where I wanted it to open. I knew things that had to happen, you know, and if I wrote it now versus 2006, when I finally got it written and got it out, I guess I started writing it in maybe 2003. Would I have built it differently? Probably, because I knew that I wanted a series of books. I knew that I couldn't tell it in one book, or it would be like, I don't know, 3,000 pages long. So I needed to create the spine. I had the characters. I needed a story spine. I did not beat it out, but I can't turn my desk, but I have a huge whiteboard for another project that is actually the prequel that I want to do to the Vision Quest. And I have all the cities, all the characters, all the main storylines, how they break down into, you know, the opening needs of the characters, the struggle and what they're suffering, what their wounds are, what is the impetus that drives that character forward, what happened to them that makes them, you know, Joseph Campbell's call to action that says, I have to go out here and save my country. Whatever it is that you do or that drives you and then therefore drives the story, were all the answers that I needed so that I could just sit down and write and not have to stop and go back. And I did. I'm trying to think of what I got to. Oh, it stumped me of what happened to religion. And I said, oh, well, we gave it to computers, and the IA and computers said, here are all the things religion has in common, because it comes from all these specific places, but it follows a very succinct need of humanity. And I went, oh, great, universal God, done, check again. But it took me a while to come to that. It's okay. There's something in every religion that relates to love, that relates to unity, that relates to seeing people for who they are. And but that took a while. Medicine took a while.
Well, that is amazing that you're basically solving all our problems. I mean, this is exciting for humanity. We can just look to you for how to save it. You know, when you're sitting down and you're writing a script for Quantum Leap, you know that Scott Bakula is going to bring those words to life. He's going to probably change, you know, humanity it up a little bit more than you expected, and it's going to be a surprise to you. But when you're writing a novel, there's no one coming in after you. I mean, the reader's going to interpret it some way, but an actor isn't. How is that different for you in sitting down to write dialogue that's going to happen in your novel versus a television script?
Well, I mean, certainly Harry Potter became a movie after a book. And because I'm a screenwriter, a lot of people that have read these books says, oh my God, this reads like a movie. This reads like a screenplay. Because dialogue is so important to me, because it is a part of what I was trained to do. I think as I've gone into, you know, some of my other books, they're not as dialogue heavy, but I think these are, as I remember. Okay, so how I do that, I don't know how you do it, Scott, but how I do that is when I'm writing, I hear my characters talk to me. I'll hear fights that they're having, and I just write them down. You know, I'll go back and edit a little bit, but mainly I'll just write down, you know, Kyla said this, Laser said this, Cashton goes this way, you know, Dietrich, his mom, comes in and says this, and then I visualize the world that they're standing in. You know, the house was dome shaped. It had, you know, portal doors. It was the color of the clay that the land it was built on, because everything was used as natural resources to be put in. And then I could use my imagination to create in my mind that world. And then luckily there's so many talented people, artists and graphic, you know, designers and stuff, so that I believe that when I do the feature films for the Vision Quest, I'm excited that there's enough in there to inspire people.
So is it gonna, I mean, has someone optioned Vision Quest?
Not yet.
Oh, well, we are offering that today to you, the home viewer. You can call this number at the bottom and get the option. You know, highest bidder wins, obviously. So get those in right away. So one of my favorite things to talk about with especially television writers is exposition, because to me, that's what sets shows apart. You know, when you have a character look at another character and say, Harry, I've known you for 20 years. I flipped the channel. You know, like, find a better way to tell me that this is a brother and a sister. You know, I rarely tell my best friend, I'm an author. You know, they know that. So how do you deal with that as, again, in a television script versus your book? Because you want those characters to unfold for the reader or the viewer. And I think you know, are great at it in Quantum Leap, although you had Al, and that certainly helped a lot. But
Al was a lot of yeah. You know, coming up in the 70s and the 80s as an actor, and as a woman of color in a time where men ruled, kind of still do, but not as much as they used to. So most of the jobs that I had were the best friend, the reporter, the teacher, the nurse. You know, I was relegated to a certain kind of piece. And I'll never forget, I was in the pilot for Airwolf, and I played Morella. And I get this huge 1.5 pages of Airwolf exposition. And I go, okay, great. So I like memorize it to go into audition. And I nail it, because I know inside myself how much I love this incredible vehicle. And I'll never forget, at the end of it, Don Belisario asked 2 questions. One was, how did you memorize that? And how did you make it sound so natural and so real? And I said, Shakespeare. And he said, what? I said, have you ever seen a Shakespearean monologue? If you don't put heart in it, no one can understand a word that you're saying. And suddenly they listen deeper. And I fell in love with your helicopter. And as I told from it, I told it from the idea of a scientist who understood every nut and bolt and wheel and how it functioned and what it could do, and my passion and excitement, I think, came through. And he goes, yeah, you got the job. Okay, but Shakespeare? You comparing me to Shakespeare? I went, okay.
I mean, that's a pretty good idea to tell the writer that you thought they were Shakespearean. I mean, that's how I'm going to end this interview now. I mean, heck, that's like the perfect way to do it. It's interesting because you've been interested in sci-fi from the very beginning, it seems like. Even, you know, you had this Star Wars thing going before the rest of us. Why can we accept political commentary, racial commentary, gender commentary through sci-fi, but we can't through like a straight drama? You know, what is it about that level that allows Americans especially to consume it when it's sci-fi?
Because it hasn't happened. It's make-believe. but it's so powerful. Your example of Star Trek, Uhura was a huge fight for NBC to have a Black woman. And when there was kind of a romance thing happening, it was a huge thing. But it also changed the psyche. This is the powerful medium that we work in. Television, books, all of it. If it's acceptable on air, eventually people go, oh, yeah, that's what that looks like. Oh, that's not bad. I'm not afraid of that. It's that fear of the unknown. So if you then take it out of hard reality and you put it into what if, I think what that gives you is somebody to go, oh, I never thought of that. And then they accept it. So I think music, television, feature films, novels, when we as creators introduce something to the world as a what if, and I think this is what pulled me into science fiction in the first place. Reading Jules Verne's. Here was a man who at the turn of the 20th century was saying, hey, let's go to the bottom of the sea. Hey, let's go to the moon. Hey, let's go to the center of the earth. And I'm going, wow, yeah, let's do that. What does that look like? And it launched my imagination into these, simple storylines. They're never going to be as complex then as they are now. And I think the simple storylines are the most powerful, by the way. If those inspired me, obviously when Star Trek came out, your telephone was that communicator. Remember the flip phones?
Sure.
It looked like Star Trek to me, but we were ready for it because science fiction made us ready for it. That's the power of this medium. That's why I love it so much.
Well, you're certainly good at it. What is your favorite sci-fi IP that you're not a part of?
Oh, currently or historically?
In your whole life. Like, what do you think is the ultimate for you?
Robert Heinlein, for sure. Probably, I was one of those kids that had health issues. So I was stuck in bed reading. I had kidney infections when I was like 10. And I came across a lot of different genres of books. I'll never forget, I read Dracula. And I couldn't put it down, but it upset me so much. So scary. And to this day, I'm not a horror film fan. I watch them, but I like the mysteries more than the horror. Anyway, I came across Stranger in a Strange Land. And that's kind of how I felt. I felt like I was a stranger in a strange land, and I didn't really belong in this world. And I thought, oh my God, somebody else that understands what it feels like when I start talking about my dreams and my ideas. And my friends used to give me so much grief because I'd come out and I said, oh, wow, I had the coolest dream. And I would tell them my dream. And one of them, Diane Miner, said to me finally, okay, just so you know, when you tell that dream at 9 o'clock in the morning when we come out to play, by the time it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it is so much bigger of a dream. So I think it's, to answer your question, I think it is the opportunity to see a story that you put yourself into, hence Quantum Leap.
Sure.
Come be in the movie, come be in the show with me. And to me, that's a successful film. Feel the Force was incredibly powerful because all I wanted was to be a Jedi once I had read that script. And I felt the same way, in Stranger in a Strange Land by Heinlein. I wanted to have somebody to step out and be this leader and guide us to a more utopian future. And then I realized it's going to happen. It might have to be you. And that empowerment can be in anybody.
Yeah, we can all change the world. So how did Quantum Leap come back? Did you pitch it? Did they come to you? And what's your involvement in the new Quantum Leap?
I've been beating on their doors trying to get it back since we went off the air. It came back because Don decided, you know, he had held the rights, which I co-hold with him. And he said, let's give these back, you know, to the studio. And once they had them, they had people under contract, and they felt that it needed a fresh voice. So Brian and Stephen came in with this idea that we couldn't afford to do, which was to create the present. You know, very rarely. Once Sam left, you were back in time with Sam. And the only connection, pretty much, other than a few rare occasions, was Al as a hologram. The cost of building a reoccurring set and writing to it, took away from the story. And I said, I got to step back. And what I said to them was, if Star Trek has had 9 television series and 9 feature films, and currently there are 3 Star Trek television series on air right now, I believe we can do that with Quantum Leap. So let's bring in some fresh thoughts and minds, and let's see where this show could go. And the same thing for the feature films. I mean, that's where I would like to go next. I'd like to do, if you remember, I wrote a trilogy of episodes in which Sam leapt into the father of a little girl.
Of course.
Into bed with her as a woman, and then came back to defend her and ended up meeting his own daughter.
That's like the greatest episode. I mean, I love that trilogy.
Thank you. I set up that Easter egg for my feature film today. And it's really just getting Universal to understand that it's a viable franchise. And unlike Disney, they're...
I got an idea for you.
Limited.
Sammy is played by Taylor Swift. They'll do it. That's all you need.
Taylor is making $1 gajillion on tour.
I'm trying to help you. I want to see Sammy.
I think he would be a wonderful Sammy Joe. Funny. She's got the kind of humor, interestingly enough. I love Taylor Swift.
Me too.
She's got the kind of humor that Scott does. It's a little bit quirky. She's stunningly beautiful, but there's something humbling and girl next door about her, and every girl about her. I think that's, besides her voice and songwriting.
And we loved when Scott sang. I mean, whenever Scott when he sings Imagine, we're so happy, and did the Elvis thing. So we've got this. I mean, we didn't sell. I checked the numbers. No one called for Vision Quest, so that's still out there. But we've sold your script. Taylor Swift is Sammy. Tweet it, #Swiftie, and let's get this movie made. This has been just such a joy for me. You know, you're an inspiration to me, but you have to be an inspiration to so many young girls who would see your name and then know that they could write and they could be part of this sci-fi. And, you know, you're a legend. You feel that, right?
Oh, thank you so very much. I humbly feel like I'm just at the beginning of what I want to create.
Well, there's so much more to do. So please tell everyone where they can get your Vision Quest series and your other works.
Vision Quest series is on Amazon. The 5th book hopefully will be coming out Q1 2024. Thevisionquest.com. If you want to write to me, I have a contact direct address that comes to me. Please do ask me questions. And then go to warrior1world.com and learn about Jetta A, and come play with us and help us create. Right now we're talking about creating a game. off this graphic novel, and a series that'll be pretty unique. So Warrior One World, thevisionquest.com, both those, warrior1world.com, visionquest.com. Please come talk to me. Ask yourself, if you're a writer, what if? And a quick note, if you're a writer, write every day. Start at your desk, even if it's for 5 minutes, but go sit there every day at the same time and write for 5 minutes, and then make yourself stop, because you'll dream work the rest of the day. So when you get back, you've got so much more to do. Keep writing.
Oh, that's such a great advice. Thank you for this. This was wonderful. For people who want to find my stuff, you can go to scottryanproductions.com. And as always, thanks to the Book Fest for all that they've put together this weekend. There's a lot more great content, so stay with us.
Keep reading.